What's going on, folks? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review Rob Zombie's early 2010 album Hellbilly Deluxe 2. Now, this is a sequel to his 98 album Hellbilly Deluxe when Rob Zombie broke away from White Zombie and decided to go solo. Now, the thing about it is, I don't feel like it's a particularly worthy follow-up to the original Hellbilly Deluxe, but it does have a small taste of some good stuff on here that is a more current version of like the hits that people clamored so much for with the original Hellbilly Deluxe. And I think that that's kind of the concept. Like it is very much still Rob Zombie, and it still has his warped sense of vision and like his kind of offhanded and differential kind of attitude towards things. But I think maybe this album is a little bit too much left field. Like at least the first one had other hits beyond like the singles. I mean, it definitely had the massive hits, Living Dead Girl, Dragula, and Super Beast, but this album is very compact to the point, and this has, despite the fact that it's only 11 songs, 10, 11 songs, it really does not have much of anything that warrants it being a follow-up to Hellbilly Deluxe. I mean, I don't remember. I reviewed the original Hellbilly Deluxe back in 2016, but I want to say that that one had other album cuts apart from just the three singles to really back it. But this album has two singles, or two and a half singles if you count the rock band promoted song Burn. But it just doesn't really have like the same expression. And like I'm fairly certain I need to go back and listen to the first Hellbilly Deluxe, but it just kind of felt like the first one had more widespread hits and a little bit more kind of pronounced songwriting. But we'll go ahead and get into that as we talk about it, because I've got more to say about this. So there were only two singles on Hellbilly Deluxe, or Hellbilly Deluxe 2. The first one is the song What, kind of like Little John What, how he shrieks that and that sort of stuff. But Rob Zombie did a variation of just a simple, basic song title What. I really like this song. It's probably the best song on the album, in my opinion. Instantly connected kind of like instrumentation in the verses. I just feel like it's a outstanding one. This is the way Rob Zombie in the late 2000s should sound. Like, apparently, some folks don't like Educated Horses as much as Sinister Urge and Hellbilly Deluxe, but I felt like I liked all the singles off of Educated Horses. But this is more late to, considering that this album was recorded in late 2008 and it premiered in late 2009. I do feel like this taste of What right here is extremely excellent. I would have to say the riff is catchy, has a nice kind of bounce to it, and it really feels like it can be played at like a night venue where you're going to hear rock music, just that sort of stuff. Easy. It can even be like a backyard smoke a stogie type stuff. It just really has like a nice feel towards it. It's not just summer. It can also be autumn, winter, spring, all those different seasons. It just really has a nice kind of creepy and ghoulish kind of feel towards it, but just in kind of a more composed and very, or more composed and kind of restricted night setting. It's not quite as crazy as Rob Zombie normally gets. It's not Super Beast or Dragula or even Living Dead Girl. It's a blue collar, almost a light blue collar, like, yeah, I would just have to say it's like a slight blue collar kind of composed Rob Zombie song that you can hear at a night venue, especially on the weekend and stuff, just for that kind of value of just getting a beer or a couple drinks and that type stuff. Works extremely well. I really like the riff on there. I'll say that again. The second single is Sick Bubble Gum. Now this has like a real kind of crazier riff on here. This is kind of the more, like, I do feel like Sick Bubble Gum can be a night venue, but this is kind of more in like a concert setting, something where you're going to have a little bit more crazy festivities. Definitely reminds me of Let It All Bleed Out from Educated Horses. Has this pounding riff that really rips things apart, and Rob Zombie gets pretty crazy in the chorus. That's kind of back on his Dragula and Living Dead Girl vibes, where it's just kind of more of a shriek and that type stuff. I definitely appreciated Sick Bubble Gum. 2 for 2 for Rob Zombie with the singles. I would definitely kind of have to say. Like I said, this is a night venue and kind of more club setting also. Maybe not so much club, but just kind of a more, like Wingstop and kind of like sports bar, those type places, night venues where you're going to have some drinks and just kind of step out and kind of, feel the breeze in your hair, that type of stuff, have some dinner outside, that sort of moments is just good for that sort of vibe. Easily can be a summer song and that type of stuff. So I really appreciated that. Sick Bubblegum's a pretty crazy song. Crazier than what, I'll definitely say. They're both pretty shrill. But the thing about this album is just the fact that Rob Zombie retains his craziness on here, but I just feel like it's too much werewolf and not enough like man in terms of like the craziness that kind of goes about it. Because I'm going to shortly talk about like the song Burn, which is kind of another kind of promo single almost. It was released on the song or the video game Rock Band. This is kind of like a lesser version of Sick Bubblegum. I feel like this is another one that could be in a nightclub setting. Definitely kind of has like that kind of sports bar and bar kind of feel towards it, but just not quite as crazy as Sick Bubblegum. But it's a nice, I definitely think, in a more brooding and gothic kind of place, some place where you're going to see a lot of goth people, especially if they're dressed up in like couture and that type stuff. I would definitely kind of have to say that this is the song for that. If it's more like Rob Zombie kind of almost approaches like cult kind of energy on this album, but Burn is definitely kind of one of those dungeon kind of feels where just the walls are black and it's just like kind of where you have to walk down to the basement to hear like the music and that type of stuff, just more secluded and kind of dark kind of feels. I mean, it's definitely a gothic album, I would have to say, and Burn really captures that energy, and it's another night venue kind of setting like Sick Bubblegum, but the energy's just toned down a bit. But yeah, so there's a lot of crazy stuff on this album, and I would be with that if the song topics were more palatable. I feel like Mars Needs Women, Werewolf Baby, Virgin Witch, Death and Destiny Inside the Dream Factory, Werewolf Woman of the SS, Jesus Frankenstein. I mean, all of these just kind of had like crazier topics, and they just felt like, for the most part, they just don't retain. Like, I would almost pick this album as like the perfect kind of nightclub setting if for like an October, late September kind of feel, this for kind of bringing out the rock stars and the rock babes and that type stuff, as far as trying to hear some of that crazy kind of energy that Rob Zombie normally retains. But I definitely feel like the songwriting is just not pitched enough, and it really, like, the difference between What and Mars Needs Women is pretty immediate. Mars Needs Women, it takes like 2 minutes for the song to start up, which I just feel like for the most part singles and songs that are intended for promotion should not kind of have that kind of vibe. I don't mind that occasionally, but maybe it should have started in like 45 seconds instead of 2 minutes that it takes for that song to kick off. And I mean, I just look after some of these things like these album cuts just don't even have I don't know why. I mean, Rob Zombie, I saw information about this project that he was really kind of disappointed in not being able to promote this album better, but there really wasn't even hardly any attempts to do that. It just felt like it was kind of straightforward. You just got a bunch of spare songs that, unless you're really like a hardcore fan of Rob Zombie, there's no point to really wanting to listen to them. And it's not like I don't enjoy Rob Zombie quite a bit, but I would have liked some songs that could just be interchangeable for like a night out, and especially like the kind of disco electronic feel of like Dragula and Living Dead Girl and that type of stuff. There's just nothing that kind of has that kind of constant going out 4 days out the week kind of craziness, and even cruising around in the whip in the summertime kind of feel of like Dragula and those type records. It just doesn't have it this time. I mean, a lot of these just feel like you're kind of more in like your domain and your kind of like den and that type of stuff, just listening. It just feels more insular this time, and it's not quite as outreaching. I mean, it's crazy, but it's just kind of more like introverted craziness, and I didn't really like that. I just felt like Hellbilly Deluxe 1 kind of had a lot more of like an outgoing kind of crazy kind of feel, but the album cuts are just very difficult to distinguish from like the singles, and they just don't have like the distinction that they need in order to really, I mean, I feel like What is the most distinguished song on here. That's an instant one, but there's really no other song like it besides Sick Bubblegum and Burn, and that really is kind of a disappointment. But so I'll go ahead and talk about the 4 songs out of 11 I recommend to you. So the 4 songs I recommend would be Sick, Bubblegum, What, Burn, and Cease to Exist. And to talk about Cease to Exist, this is kind of a demented one. I really wish that Rob Zombie would kind of laid off would have I kind of wish that Rob Zombie would have laid off like some of the horror kind of feels of this and had some song topics that could have been more interesting, not just like a B movie type stuff, but actually topics like going to the bar and puking, or you know, pink thongs, something like that, some type song that Pink Thong, some song like that that could have really showcased like the topics that was on Rob Zombie's mind at the time. But for the most part, it's just minus Cease to Exist. That's about the only song minus the singles that I listed for you that doesn't have like a B movie and kind of more horror type feel towards it, which is kind of disappointing because I would have liked to have known what else was on Rob Zombie's mind. But Cease to Exist is really demented. I really like the kind of this brooding and kind of sulking and kind of oozing kind of in a this demented kind of way type feel towards it. It's not a club song, not a stepping out song, but one of those den songs where it just feels like, yeah, it's just a real like just letting the music blaze and that type of stuff. Just really has a nice vibe to it. But me liking 4 songs out of 11, and the 4 songs I recommend to you out of 11, I'm gonna give this album 4 out of 11. I'm gonna give this album a 3.75 out of 10. I would almost give it a 4, but I just feel like it's less than 40% of the project. So 3.75 out of 10. It just really had a lot of work to do. This was not that outstanding whatsoever. The only reason to really pick this project up for is just the singles, which is Brief. I mean, I feel like What is definitely the best moment, and Sick Bubblegum is like the second best, just depending upon the craziness of what you want. But there's just not any other songs that have the sheer kind of distinction and impact of the very brief 2 singles that this project has. So it's kind of the thing. But the social score, I will give a 4.5 out of 10 because at least the singles were good. And I did like the fact that they at least tried to promote a pseudo third single with Burn. But I guess really Rob Zombie was kind of pressed for time, so they just were not able to promote this project the way they needed to. But it just was kind of botched just because we kind of got fucked out of an album. We kind of got screwed out of an album and stuff. So this is kind of the situation. I just feel like a Rob Zombie album, considering how sparse he kind of is with putting out new albums, there's just no excuse for him to have less than 3 or 4 singles. He should be doing that. That's just kind of the thing. But in terms of the future, Rob Zombie dropped an album back in 2021, which was pretty good. Or at least I would like to think it was pretty good. I'm going to have to check it out. But I'm going to start getting back more into Rob Zombie more and that type of stuff. But for the most part, this is a purchasable project, but there's really nothing of note beyond like the 2.5, 3 singles on here.